Welcome back, baseball fans, to the last section, the token round section of the draft. The 8 rounds of the draft are done. That doesn't mean the season is ready to begin because teams still need to fill out the ends of their roster if they do not have enough players because they improved existing players, or they simply want to replace players they had last year they find aren't as good as the new talent that's coming into the league. This has proved to be a much longer, difficult process than in previous years, and that was sort of by design because of the timelines colliding. The last year in the summer league, you recall, we had some 80 players mixed in with a 69, 70, 71. Not just some 80 players, 256 of the 640 were from the 80s. So what that meant for the last many years is that I was pulling players from two separate eras in an open draft, from the early 80s and from the 69 early 70s. So now it's time to close the book on that, which meant that those 256 players had to leave. Only 16 players were old enough in 1984 to have been playing baseball at some point between 69 and 72. So that meant that 240 spots had to be taken in the draft, meaning that this draft is atypical of a standard carryover league draft. And now that I've gone through the process, I understand that the 4-year carryover league is a much easier process and is very fluid and creates competition and success amongst all the teams if you stick to the rules year in, year out, and you're just moving forward in a timeline with card sets of a similar population of players, such as the Strat-O-Matic Super Advanced sets from 1969 to 1984, even though the number of teams in Major League Baseball was different for the two eras. So I started this project with the 1977 expansion with Seattle and Toronto from 24 to 26 teams. And then I ran that for 5 years to get to the 81-84, and that's when I went back in the timeline to 1969. And for 4 years, it's been a lot of fun, but now it's time to get back to the proper 69, 70, 71, 72. And what I discover is I kind of miss the extra population of players that Seattle and Toronto provided for that period of the late 70s, early 80s. There's only 24 baseball teams available, and I got to stretch the talent through 84. And I knew this all along, and it was going to be a difficult task. The hardest task is this token round. The token round, which I'm about to show, is normally just a procedural matter where teams who want to swap guys out, and there's some last minute trades are done. In this case, the time I've spent drafting I usually do a couple hours in the evening, and then on a Saturday, I'll spend all day doing it, and then I'll be done. But this kept me into Sunday afternoon, so it took me more time to do this draft than normally would. And that is because of you don't have the I guess you call them the easy adds. The obvious players are available to add year in and year out. We proved that in one of the earlier videos where 70% of players come back year to year, and in this particular case, we only have about 7% coming back. So with that, the token round. There was so much token use and so many player use. Let's first look at the tokens and how they played out. So we start with the Angels were the first pick in the draft, and extended down to the Orioles, who won the World Series, picking at 32. In these fields, I created 16 regions. I didn't need 16. I just anticipated more token use, so I created space. These are all the trades where tokens were added and subtracted. And then when you look at the grand total of tokens, you're looking at 3 teams who got the magic number of 7 the most. San Diego got 7, as did Kansas City, as did the San Francisco Giants. They all got 7. And then the teams that got 6, you see California and Seattle, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Atlanta, Detroit. There you go. And then 5 would be the commonality. And then you have the teams who lost tokens would be 4. There were actually no teams with 3 this year, but there was one team with 2, which was Cleveland, which would be picking last in the token round, and they have to wait until everybody else gets their guys. So Cleveland has to wait to get that final player for their roster. With that being said, let's go right into the tokens for the draft. And San Diego, you saw. We'll go right here at the beginning here. And San Diego had a need to fill a roster spot up, and they had Chris Cannizzaro as the only catcher on the roster, so they take Clay Dalrymple. It's nice because Cannizzaro has a good throwing arm, Dalrymple doesn't. He's got a left-handed bat with a 728 OPS, so that's your platoon at catcher. You know, none of these token picks are going to be flashy, but they can make or break a team if they fall short stretching out their roster. All right, Kansas City, the next team with 7 tokens, was also the first team to pass, meaning that they looked at the roster and said, we're good, we got what we like, we knocked it out of the park, so to speak. They did all that with teams giving them tokens and trades. So they had this big fat cushion of tokens that they didn't even have to use in this draft, as it turns out. All right, next team is the Giants, who had 7 tokens. They had a spot open for a starting pitcher, a right-handed starting pitcher, the number 4 pitcher. And they took Dean Chance, who was the best available pitcher from 1969, not in the league. He's a 2.95 ERA and a 1.25 WHIP. Dean Chance. Then, after that, the Angels decided to simply improve their roster. They had 1971 Don Eddy that they had from Baltimore, but they simply cut him and replaced him with a 1971 Dave LaRoche. Remember, the year has to match. All teams need to have 8, 6, 4, and 2 players from each of the 4 seasons. So Dave LaRoche is an improvement on Dave Eddy as lefty setup guy. Next, the Padres again. Remember we said they had 7 tokens. So the teams with 7 tokens picked. California is one of the teams with 6, and now San Diego, with their second pick, they needed to get a middle infielder, and they got Rich Morales to play shortstop with Steve Hunts. Not a flashy pick, but they had to complete their roster. He becomes their 20th player at that point. Seattle needed a corner outfielder who bats left-handed. Don't worry about the defense because he's going on a platoon with Ron Woods, who can catch the ball. So they took Lee May from the Washington Senators, who had a 754 OPS. Then the Phillies took Jim Beauchamp to platoon with Johnny Callison. Then the Pirates had a pick, and Pirates decided to take Julio Navarro with this pick as a pitcher who gave up 7 home runs in 26 innings. But the plan is for the Pirates to use this card only as a a junk pitcher, blowout loss pitcher, and not put him in a situation where he could lose the game by giving up a home run. So now we get down to the team Kansas City. Remember, they had 7 tokens here in pass. They have 6 tokens here in pass as well. Next up is Atlanta. Needed a reliever. They took Fred Lasher. Then Detroit Remember with Detroit, we talked about that they did not account for third and short in the draft. So at those two positions, they're going to have Kevin Collins, Elliot Maddox, and Dick Tracewski. Tracewski can defend at short. Collins is a left-handed bat at third. And when they're not playing, Elliot Maddox will play either third or short for Detroit. It's not a pretty picture there, but that was the last hole in the Tiger roster. The Giants again had to add a infielder, outfielder, and Jose Herrera is an infielder, outfielder. Next up, California. We're now at the teams with 5 tokens. This is the amount of tokens you get, and this is where you're going to find most of your transactions. So California passed. So right now we have the Kansas City and California as teams who pass, and when you pass for the rest of the draft. Now, Las Vegas is the second overall pick in the draft, but they did not have tokens, so they couldn't have gotten any of these guys, and they have plenty of roster spots to fill. They needed a 4th infielder. This is a nice future pick. They took Tim Cullen. He's got good defense, but the hope is to improve his card when he has better offense by 1972. All right, the Padres, after making the 2 moves they made, they get the pass. So the Padres used excellent use of token, meaning they got the 1st and 4th players available, and they're done, while everybody else is still trying to complete their roster. After them, we have Milwaukee. They got plenty of spots to fill. They get Jerry May to catch with Jerry McNertney, a couple Jerrys behind the plate for Milwaukee. The Cardinals surprisingly need a lot of players because they elected to improve their older guys like Torrey Gibson and Jose Cardinal. They needed a corner outfielder, and Jim Gosger brings a 721 OPS to the table with some defense. That's a nice little pick, actually. The Marlins needed a catcher to go with Ken Suarez and took Ellie Rodriguez. The Expos pass. And the Expos, like Kansas City, were happy with the 20 guys. They were happy with the 12 guys they protected. They were happy with the 12 guys who start the draft. They drafted 8 guys and said, we're done. Transactionless, team there. Arizona did the same thing. They also passed. The White Sox needed somebody to play center field, and Russ Snyder's... The cookie jar is starting to run down here, folks. Russ Snyder will be playing center field with Don Young for the White Sox. All right, Seattle, their second player in this round. After taking Lee May earlier, they need another catcher with John Ellis, and they got Jim Price, guy with a lot of power. His batting average is bad, but you can use him in a platoon to be more effective. The Yankees, they've got 3 roster spots to fill, 1 pitcher and 2 hitters, I believe. And they get Andy Costco, who can play DH and first base against Rays if you don't want to put Danny Cater at first base. The Phillies decided they had 20 players, but they looked at the roster and said, we want to upgrade our catcher against lefties to platoon with Tim McCarver. They had Bob Didier, who was a switch hitter, and they replaced him with Russ Gibson, who hits lefties pretty well and has a good throwing arm. Next up, Boston needed a position in the middle infield. Somebody to back up Mike Andrews, Rico Petrocelli, and John Kennedy, and Van Kelly is left-handed and can play those positions. All right, now the Pirates. Again, this is a team that I said earlier, man, they look like a World Series team. But they come into the token round with a 17-man roster. One of their players was Julio Navarro, who was almost like, it was a Pirates' way of flipping the bird at the rest of the league, saying we don't even need 20 players. So, but they follow this up by taking Rich Nye as a lefty reliever, and the best one on the board, has a 5.11 ERA and a 1.354 WHIP. So Pittsburgh's going to have a weak. Their long men in their bullpen is going to be the worst in baseball, but they may not need it if the 17 guys I said are the best in baseball. So that's the trick for the Pirates this year. So now we're down to Kansas City, who was passed throughout. And the Cubs. This is how this draft works. The Cubs needed a catcher, and who'd they take? Bob Didier, the guy that was just released 3 transactions earlier, and it opens up a spot. That's exactly what the Cubs were looking for: a switch hitting or left-hand hitting catcher to platoon with Randy Hundley. Next up, Atlanta decides to pass, happy with their team, as do the Rangers, which is a great sign. The Rangers made the playoffs last year in a surprise move. They have a very thin farm system, but they managed to put together a pretty good pitching staff again and are running it back with Frank Howard and Mike Epstein and those guys, hoping the Cinderellas does not strike midnight again. Okay, the Dodgers. They got a reliever, Dave Baldwin, to play pitch and long relief. Not a big concern for the Dodgers. They have a great 4-man rotation, and the other 3 relief pitchers are good. So it was a mere formality who the 8th pitcher in their staff would be. The Twins brought a twin back, Bob Allison. Needed a corner outfielder, and that's exactly what Allison was with the Twins. Corner outfielder, a right-handed hitter who could hit left-handers very well with power. So the Twins are glad that he was still available. Detroit finally passes now after resolving the shortstop third base conundrum. That they had no other issues in their roster, so they will pass. The Giants, in the notes I said do something about Hal Lanier, but they decided to keep Hal Lanier because he's a left-handed bat switch hitter, so they kept Lanier and they have passed. The Giants already took a couple players anyway. They took Dean Chance and they also took Jose Herrera. So this is the first time they have a 20-man roster and taking a look at the squad, and that's why they pass. All right, now the teams with 4 tokens, beginning with the Angels. Now you're going to start seeing a lot of passing, right? So the Angels had a pass they used. Vegas is still building a team. They're still putting a team together while other teams have finalized their roster. But Las Vegas has added Jeff Torborg to platoon a catcher with John Bacabella. Congratulations, Jeff Torborg. All right, the Padres passed. We knew about that. Milwaukee, interestingly, this is their first pass. Right, Jerry May completed their roster, and Milwaukee passes. That's good to see. The Cardinals, again, this is the best move of the draft, though. So, in the best move in the token round, it turns out that Wayne Simpson, a starter 7 for the Reds in 70, he went 14-3 with a 3.02 ERA, was left unprotected. And every team above them who was eligible to take a player did not need a starting pitcher from 1970. That was the problem. If you go back to Dean Chance, it was 1969. All the 70 guys, Pittsburgh, the Pirates, they didn't have any room for Wayne Simpson to put him as a relief pitcher. That's why they had to pick crappy relievers instead of Wayne Simpson. And then you had position players from 1970 were the other spots. So the Reds said, let's take Chuck Taylor, a guy notoriously could start or relief, who was starting last year for the Cardinals. Let's put him back in the bullpen and get Wayne Simpson. So finally, the Cardinals get a huge break in this draft after really struggling. And now you got Wayne Simpson, who's a really good starting pitcher, teaming up with Bob Gibson and Ken Holtzman and Rick Wise. So at least the Cardinals will have a pretty stellar starting rotation. I know this draft has really been a struggle for them, following it rather closely, particularly because they're in the same division with Cincinnati and Pittsburgh and even the Cubs. So yeah, the Cardinals are on the short end of the stick in this particular era of the Carryover League. All right, next up, Florida. The Marlins, they made a transaction up here, adding a catcher, and they needed to make another transaction, getting an infielder. Cesar Gutierrez fills the need at short with Chico Ruiz for the Marlins. All right, the Expos pass. Toronto gets their first crack at a player because they had run down on tokens. And they needed a shortstop against lefties, and they took Tommy Dean. We saw him in the Winter Baseball Classic as a shortstop against lefties. He's a 3.17. Okay, now you're back to Arizona passing. All right, the White Sox needed to add a middle infielder with some defense, and they have Al Weiss, who, by the way, is a switch hitter, indicated by that pound sign next to his name. The Strat-O-Matic card has him as a right-handed batter, but I'll make the correction because it's important for that team, him to be used as a switch hitter to be effective. So that'll help the White Sox who get some defense. All right, Seattle, they also are still putting a team together. This is the third guy now. They took Lee May, they took Jim Price, and now Rick Rennick, an infielder. They had a catcher, an outfielder, and an infielder so far for Seattle. Portland gets their first crack at a guy. They needed a left-handed reliever, and they found a very young Fred Norman. Actually, he's 27 in 1970. Anyway, he was a reliever with a 5.14 ERA in 31 appearances and a 1.5 whip. This is a good project because if you hold on to Fred Norman, he'll eventually be a pretty good starting pitcher for the Reds and the Expos in the mid to late 70s. So that's a good futures pick there. The Yankees finished their bullpen by taking Ron Willis with a 3.89 ERA. Philadelphia passed. Did they pass before? I can't recall here. Oh no, Philadelphia had improved their catching position. And so now, after doing that, they agree to pass. They don't need to make any more transactions. The Red Sox are still making moves. They made a move up here for Van Kelly to play in the infield. They actually they drafted they had 9 pitchers and 11 hitters, so they actually cut Gary Peters to make room for Angel Bravo. 277 batting average, and another left-handed bat to play designated hitter, just to get another left-handed bat in the lineup for the Red Sox. But they're loaded. They have more than enough everyday players. They don't even need the platoon. All right, the Mets, corner outfielder with defense. He needs a 3 in right field. Frank Johnson, 273 batting average, but they really got him so he could catch the ball since Kenny Singleton could not and is more of a designated hitter. So at least Frank Johnson, Cleon Jones, Tommy Agee, and Johnson. That's good defense. Plus they have good infield defense. This is a move to protect the pitching staff more than anything. And again, here's Pittsburgh, their third player they had to add in this round. They have Manny Sanguine, but you have to have 2 catchers, so they took Ken Rudolph, who had 206. So those last 3 Pirate players you saw in this token round are not very good, and they are potentially going to be on a World Series team, possibly. Next up, Houston. What did they do up here? This is their first pick as well. They needed to add a middle infielder. They added Jose Martinez. Ohio players, this is their first move. Again, these are the 4 teams with 4 tokens, meaning that these are teams who use tokens in this draft, and this is their first crack to add a player. So Ohio needed a reliever. They took 40-year-old Al Worthington. Kansas City passes, of course. The Cubs pass. That Bob Didier ad from earlier was all they needed to finish their roster. So the Cubs are happy with how things are going, as is Atlanta and Texas. And now you see here, Kansas City, the Cubs, Atlanta, Texas will be passing you'll see these 4 passes in a row, and the Dodgers for the rest of the draft. So Minnesota still needs to add. They needed a third base against lefties, and Astromonte can do that, plus also play some outfield. Cesar Tober can play third base in the outfield. They also have Killebrew can play third. Minnesota has a way of flipping their roster, flipping their lineup. They can go with multiple lineups. All right, the Rockies took a typical Rocky kind of player. Corner outfielder, left-handed batter here who hits homers and walks a lot, because that's how they usually build their team. Joe LaHood. All right, the Tigers, we knew they passed earlier. Oakland, the A's, and they need to add players. A lefty to their bullpen. This is where it's really getting dicey here. Now we're getting a 5.29 ERA. We saw Fred Norman with a 5.14 ERA earlier. I think we saw Rich Nye with a 5.11 ERA. So this is where your team is going to live and die, is that you can't go to the bullpen and find a guy throwing left-handed who's effective. And that could be how you lose your Strat-O-Matic games. As simple as that. You could have a great offense, great rotation, and boom, that's how you lose it. Giants pass. We knew about that. The Reds complete their bullpen. Dave Wickersham is a right-handed reliever who gets lefties out well to complement Clay Carroll and Wayne Granger as righties who get righties out. It's a sensible, smart move by the Reds here, trying to get back to the World Series. So actually, I really like what the Reds did here versus what the Pirates did. Maybe this division really is a toss-up between Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. I think it's going to be one of the most competitive divisions in the Carryover League, as I think the Cubs are good, and I'm not sure what to expect from the Cardinals. It's really a bizarre era. And who knows, Joe Torre at 363 and Bob Gibson's Bob Gibson. Maybe they get lucky and run, something crazy happens. But that's going to be the best division of baseball, I think. All right, the Orioles. They need to have 3 guys, and they've been really unimpressed with the, guys just kind of fall in their laps, and they feel that they already have a great team, so they'll just take best player available. Danny Walton's 1970 card has a 790 OPS. It was the highest OPS in the entire token round. And Baltimore gets him here because nobody else needed a right-handed hitting corner outfielder who can't field. Baltimore was the only team that needed one, and they get the best pure hitter that was available to be their DH. California. So now we're down to the 3 token teams. The 3 token teams are the ones, I think none of the teams had 3 tokens. So you're going to see in this part teams that just don't have 20 men on the roster yet. So we're going to see a lot of passing going on here. California is done. Las Vegas is still building. We know about them. They had Ramon Webster to play first base, batting left-handed. Then again, you're going to see a nice chunk of passes here. You're going to see basically it's Las Vegas, St. Louis, Seattle, and Baltimore are the teams that need players, I think. So St. Louis took Jose Arcia to play shortstop with Tom Tresh. This is concerning for Cardinal fans, I think, that they're not making good moves in this draft. Florida passes, and now we're going to see a nice little string of teams passing. And then Seattle, this is like their 4th pick in the token round. They took another corner outfielder who could field, Dave May. He's a 2 with a -2 arm. This allows Kurt Motton, who cannot field, to play full-time DH. So 4 players so far for Seattle in the token round. Portland adds Frank Baker II. And the reason I do this is because both Frank Bakers bat left-handed, and I don't want to be confused who's who. Frank Baker I is a Yankees infielder, and Frank Baker II was a Cleveland outfielder. And their eras are 69 and 70 for the one guy, and 70 to 74 for the other guy. So it could easily be confused into thinking they're the same person, but they're not. They're 2 separate people. And they'll both be in the Summer League for everybody's enjoyment. All right, the Yankees needed a middle infielder. No big deal here. They took Juan Rios because he bats right-handed and can play all the infield positions because they have Horace Clarke, Gene Michael, and Greg Nettles, all switch hitters or left-handers. So they wanted a right-handed bat. All right, now the Phillies pass. We know about Boston passing. The Mets finished their rotation with Bill Zepp. No big deal. 3.22 ERA. He's the 8th pitcher. If he's pitching, it means that it's a blowout one way or the other. I don't expect there to be a lot of blowouts in Mets games. But yeah, he's the last line of defense. They have best rotation and 3 of the best 4 relievers in baseball. And Bill Zepp now. All right, the Pirates passed. After adding 3 lackluster guys, they looked at the other 17 guys, pumped up their chest, and said, nah, we'll still roll everybody. So they passed. Houston now passes. The Ohio players took a reliever last time, Al Worthington, and now they said, we want to add a catcher who hits left-handers. Even though he hit 176, he can hit lefties okay with power. And they cut Jackie Hernandez, who was an extra shortstop they didn't need anymore, because he was replaced by Daryl Thomas. So Kansas City again passes in the Cubs. That long string of teams passing. Colorado Rockies. This is kind of like some teams get so lucky, and the Rockies got kind of lucky here, if you want to call it luck. So Boston drafted 9 pitchers, and they had to cut Gary Peters. He was their 4th left-hander. You can only have 3. So they cut Gary Peters, and then the Rockies say, oh, thanks. And they just picked him up. He's not really that good, 4.06 ERA in 220 innings, but he goes in the rotation, and for the Rockies, he would be a good pitcher. He would be a bump up to what they normally have. All right, Detroit passes. Oakland, this is actually a pretty cool move. So Joe Rudi, with his 70 card, is not good defensively yet. And he's a 40-15 at first base. So they got Chuck Harrison, and he's a 2E11. So he'll play first base while Joe Rudi plays designated hitter against lefties. The Giants and Reds pass, and the Orioles are adding their second of 3 players. Ruben Amaro, they needed a middle infielder, and he's a switch hitter to go with the 3 right-handers, Grich, Bobby Grich, Davey Johnson, and Brooks Robinson. Okay, down into 2 token teams. Starting again with California, who passes. Now you're going to see a lot of passing, except for Las Vegas, St. Louis, and again, Cleveland hasn't picked yet, and Baltimore, I think. So California, and here's Las Vegas again, has to take a player. Julio Gote, as a guy who plays second and third. He can hit left-handed pitching pretty well. He'll be your designated hitter against lefties for a really bad Las Vegas team. Then you have the nice long teams that pass. San Diego, Milwaukee passes. The Cardinals, Jackie Hernandez was passed here by the Ohio players. He was cut to make room for Dave Watkins. And then 5 transactions later, the Cardinals pick up a player that an expansion team, Ohio, cuts, Jackie Hernandez, to play shortstop against lefties. It's not looking good. And Tom Tresh moves into corner outfield. So Jackie Hernandez and that other Jose Arcia will be the 2 shortstops for St. Louis. Tresh can play short, but he can also be a good defense in the outfield. Oh boy, St. Louis. I don't know about them. Florida, and now you're going to see the long stream of teams that are happy. All right, Cleveland. This is the first time I mentioned the Cleveland Indians in this entire video here. They finally get their 20th guy. They needed a corner outfielder, a left-handed hitting corner outfielder. This guy goes passed over by so many teams in the draft because he's just okay. He was one of the guys in the Winter Baseball Classic that I said, I don't know if he's going to get into the Summer League, but he does. Dave Marshall, a left-handed hitter who's a 3 in the outfield, goes to the Indians. If the Indians had a token earlier in this draft, they might have taken Lee May at that position, or Jim Gosger were the better players, but they had to settle for Dave Marshall. He doesn't have power. So now you're going to see more passing going on. And then Baltimore takes Jimmy Hall with the final pick for them. A 4th outfielder to go with Don Buford, Paul Blair, Frank Robinson. So they just needed a guy in case one of those top 3 gets hurt. Jimmy Hall. He's a beast stealer with power. Left-handed hitter to play all 3 outfield positions. Simple as that. And that should, we go to the 1 tokens, and hopefully by now everybody's passed, starting with the Angels. Do we have the 32 passes, or is somebody still going to add guys? Looks like everybody passed with a token left over. Yep. And that ends this portion, or the rosters are, at least at this point, locked in. And it's time to start playing baseball. The Summer League will begin, and that'll be the next video I upload. The format will be opening days this year. Last year I was playing elimination games of a series because all the regular season is all best ofs. But because we're starting it, I'm going to do opening days. The 16 opening day broadcast is what I'll start with in the Summer League. And they'll be beginning with the world champion Orioles. Their opponent will be the Detroit Tigers in a best of 5. Thank you for checking out the video. We'll see you soon.